We have an amazing data and tech company here to shed some light on the industry for you. We have Cy Scott with Headset. He is here being moderated by Amanda Marie Goldston, Senior Consultant of Technology and Global Consulting Solutions at CohnReznick. Let's bring on out Amanda and Cy. Please give them a warm, warm welcome. There we are.
Send out everything, but I appreciate it.
No. You good?
Hey, man. How are you?
Good.
How you been?
Oh, man, I can't complain.
I think they said that they're running behind, so they're...
Hello? Mic check?
Can you guys hear us okay?
Can anyone hear me speak?
How
there we are.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for the intro. I am Amanda Goldston with CohnReznick, and I have the pleasure today of interviewing Cy Scott, who is the CEO and co-founder of Headset, which provides the cannabis industry with market and retail intelligence and analytics to help operators and investors make more informed decisions in their operations. So let's start right at the beginning and get right into it. When you were looking to move on from Leafly, what made you decide that data was the answer for the cannabis industry?
Sure. So this was back in 2015, which is quite some time in cannabis years. And the world was very different, I would say, in 2015. But we really thought about what was next. We wanted to stay in the cannabis industry. We knew there was just so much opportunity ahead. And we were really thinking about, what is that next thing? And, data came to mind for a few reasons. One, it was getting much more competitive out there. In the early days of cannabis, it was enough to produce a product, to open a dispensary, and things would sell. There weren't a lot of, branded goods on the shelves. Everything was pretty vertically integrated, pretty medical at that time. But it started to change, and you started to see brands popping up. You started to see shelf space getting taken up by, a variety of product companies. And there's not infinite room at a retail location, right? And so it started getting more competitive on the shelf, started getting more competitive at retail, where more and more stores are opening up in your area, or dispensaries and medical markets. And we knew that data would be more and more important to help differentiate and make smart decisions about that, because you can just produce a product or open a location and make a lot of money anymore. So that was one kind of driver. Another one was just the sophistication of the operators in cannabis and those that were interested in the cannabis industry. It was really growing. I mean, the level of sophistication, you started to see people from other industries jumping into cannabis instead of kind of the world coming from the illicit market early on into this kind of gray market, medical. But you did see some professionals coming in, and those professionals from other verticals are used to looking at data to drive decisions. And they were coming into the category and finding that there wasn't really much available for them. Really, finally, it's thinking about cannabis as like a consumer packaged good ultimately. And what that means, and when you think about consumer packaged goods, the traditional CPG industry leverages a lot of data to drive decisions. And so just knowing that this is the direction that the market was going to go, and is still going, it made a lot of sense to go after the data space. And when we decided to do data, we said to ourselves, well, what would we do differently than maybe a company like Nielsen or a company like IRI that services the CPG world? And these companies, were founded long ago and have systems and processes that they put into place, a while back. And we thought, well, it's 2015, what can we do differently? And the first thing we thought is sourcing data from retailers and dispensaries directly was critical. So retail measurement data. And instead of, getting it on a monthly cadence, we thought we would connect directly into their point of sale systems, their system of record, to be able to understand what's going on in the transaction, see the receipt, see the basket, see the consumer, and get a lot more insights than organizations like Nielsen are able to in traditional CPG. And that's one of the most exciting things about the cannabis category, is that we're able to create new ways of doing things and not just have to use the same playbook, but really think, okay, if we're going to do market intelligence, we're going to do data, what could we do differently that is only better and to the expectations of the customer, nowadays, which is, real time, a great depth of data, great analytics, easy user experience to get answers to what you're looking for. And that's really like how the whole thing started.
Oh, that's a pretty interesting story. Thank you for sharing that with us. So in terms of how operators actually use data to make decisions, I know what we've seen with our clients is that there are really kind of four main ways that data can help. So things to drive operational efficiencies, get at those kind of margin capture opportunities, ways to use market insights, obviously what you do to understand customer demand in the space, things around those risk mitigation kind of activities, so to minimize out of stocks and things. And then finally around those strategic planning, kind of M&A forward-thinking decisions. So in your experience, would you say that those four categories are truly the four main categories? Is there anything coming next in the future of data and cannabis?
Yeah, I think those categories are broad enough to encapsulate a lot of things. And it's really just how you define things. Like, strategic decisions can mean so much. But I think that's a good way to look at it, operational efficiencies and kind of broad strategic opportunities. I think the next area of opportunity in data is like a layer down, is like, how can you use data in effective ways to drive those strategies and understanding like what you're trying to answer. I think one of the biggest challenges for everyone, ourselves included at Headset, is kind of knowing, where do you start? What questions are you trying to answer? What problems are you trying to solve? And then making that easier for the end user of the platform. And I think that you're starting to see more and more of that in traditional like tech data companies, things like prescriptive analytics, where it kind of tells you what you need to be doing instead of like the traditional dashboards and spreadsheets where you're really trying to infer, what is all this data telling me to do? Instead, kind of serving that up, right? And saying, here's what you should do, and here's the data that backs up that position. Based on whatever use case you might be having. If it's operational efficiencies, like which items should I be reordering, which items should I be removing from my store shelves? Right now, a lot of systems, the way to do it is just to look at the numbers and try and infer it. But I think you're going to see more innovation in that prescriptive side to really show you this is what you should be doing, and this is the data that supports that, and here's the ROI that you'll see on that. So I think that's kind of where you go beyond like those large buckets of using data. It's kind of drilling deeper and making it more effective, making it easier for people to utilize. I mean, we're surrounded by data, right? Like everywhere, and it can be tough to just distill that down and know when to start when you log in or you load up that spreadsheet or whatever. And so I think just systems and tools to make that easier are really the next frontier.
That's fair. And I know we talked about in a prior conversation as well, the possibility of using data now more for pricing and promotions, or even that to have a shared common language between operators so that they can compare notes easier and understand what's going on in other aspects of the business that might help them.
Absolutely. I think collaboration is another way that data will be leveraged more and more in the future. These systems are more able to talk to each other through APIs, and there's going to be ways and more ways where you're going to see organizations leveraging that because everyone, if you're an operator in the industry, you have a lot of different systems that you're working with. And then when you're working with a vendor, a partner, whoever it may be, they have a whole host of other systems, right? And so creating that kind of common currency, that language that you can use to talk about your business or the market based on data and collaborate there, I think is another thing that we're going to see more of. We're going to see retailers sharing more data and brands supporting retailers with more data and everything in between.
And then, so what do you think might come out of this? Is there one particular data point or one particular type of information that operators undervalue the importance of today that maybe they should be looking into more?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. It really depends, I think, on the type of operator, and there's probably all sorts of inefficiencies at looking at it, and everyone's getting better and better at it, and we're seeing that happen as organizations are investing in analysts internally and starting to look at the numbers. I think like maybe top of mind because of the week, because it's 420 or it was 420 yesterday. 420 is such a big event for retail. and you've got all sorts of promotions. And I think promotions are still relatively unsophisticated. I think the data points around that maybe are under leveraged. The type of promotions that you're running, and organizations understanding, well, how does that impact their business ultimately? Not just like bringing people in the door, but do those people come back because of the type of promotion that was run, or are they stocked up and you won't see them for 3 months? Do you want to retain those customers and make them loyal customers? Looking at the type of promotions that can help with that are important. Looking at the type of promotions that can keep your margins nice. I think that's other areas that just are a little underrepresented yet. But I think that like everything in this industry, it's getting better and better. And obviously I'm generalizing. There's a lot of operators that are really good at this. But I think, the broad industry, when you're thinking about, thousands of dispensaries out there, that's probably one of the more challenging things. And that applies to the brands too, their vendors, their wholesalers, like, how they're positioning the pricing for their products to be able to support promotions and pricing efficiencies for them.
And I imagine that ties into what we've seen in other industries as well outside of cannabis. So I guess going back to something that you mentioned earlier in terms of CPG industry, I want to talk about what's next for the cannabis industry. So in a lot of ways, we know the industry is still developing. Brands are trying to differentiate themselves. There's a lot of M&A activity, et cetera. So do you really see the industry continuing to evolve as CPG did, or do you see it kind of taking a sort of different path, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good one. We should all take a long bet on, like, what does the world look like 10, 20 years from now in cannabis? Is it going to look like it does today? When you look at the MSOs and significant vertical integration, and they have a retail business and they have a wholesale business, and you see in other markets more wholesalers, like strictly wholesale or strictly retail. And that's kind of the traditional CPG model, right? When you think about traditional retail CPG model, there's not a lot of vertical integration, right? And when you're a grocery chain, you're not producing a lot of products. You may private label products, but you're not distributing those to your competitors. So I think that's the big question, of what it looks like. I think that the reason we see it look the way it looks today is because of the regulatory frameworks and because of things like supply. When you look at like New Jersey today, coming online for adult use sales, the operators that are there have to make sure they have the supply, right? And they have to produce that supply, because they can't just go to brands to get that product for their store shelves yet, right? But maybe eventually they can. Maybe it gets more sophisticated. Maybe you see, long term some interstate opportunities. These are all the big existential questions that we have, I think, as an industry. But I have to believe that, on a long enough time horizon, it will look more like traditional CPG. But I think it is a very long time horizon. I think we've got a lot of years in the world we're in today, and continuing to scale into the world we're in today. So I think, when we sit down 10 years from now, maybe we can see where it lands. But I don't think we can see, between now and then. I think it'll look a lot like it looks now, but I think we're pushing towards that. Now, all sorts of variables can change that.
So if it does push towards CPG, how can data help now get everyone to the next level? And what have we seen in the CPG industry that maybe we can bring into cannabis?
Yeah. Obviously, trying to understand what's going on with the consumer, what consumer preferences look like. What are their baskets look like? What's their profile? What kind of category of products are they buying? Where is the growth in these categories? So really understanding that, I think, and that's something that a lot of organizations are doing today, right? To make decisions around the types of products that they're producing, the type of innovation that they may be pursuing. So I think CPG is no different. I think actually, like, this industry will have some advantages to CPG because of the access to data that's much better than in traditional CPG models. Although there are a lot of vendors, I'd say, in like traditional CPG for data. But I think that's probably where it starts, understanding the competitive landscape, finding that opportunity. And if you do have a brand in market, how are your products performing?
Mm-hmm. And likely that can help even a step back and actually create the brands as well and help bring them to market easier with the right customers, et cetera.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. So next, let's get into premiumization. Is that next? Are we ready for that? Are we ready for premium products? Or I know there are still challenges in a lot of markets in just meeting mainstream consumer demand. So maybe touch on where you think we're going with that next.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, and I think the answer is yes in a lot of markets, but maybe not all markets yet. It's like to your point of just some are just getting going. Like in New Jersey today, they're probably going to sell everything that they possibly can, regardless of price. And so maybe not there yet, but I think in other markets certainly. You see in a lot of in markets, mature markets, we kind of classify different states as like mature or emerging, and like the mature markets are those that have been online for a number of years. You know, like Colorado certainly has been on the longest. California has been online for quite some time at this point, and you're starting to see that happening today. You're starting to see, brands introducing premiumization with the different tiers, value price brand and kind of a standard and a premium price. So that is happening. And I think it's a nice offset when you see a lot of price compression happening too. You see that's happening in Florida, for example, right? Price compression is happening. And instead of just discounting for your products, you could start to look at introducing products at different levels, and maybe a value price brand is at that discounted rate, and you try and keep your prices high for the other products. So I think there's some advantages to doing it as well. And I think, the consumer is used to it. I mean, it kind of goes back to the thought of like CPG, it will be like a CPG industry. And that's just what people are used to buying. People are used to buying products that are, a premium product, or maybe they're used to buying, value price products. So I really don't think that long term this will be that different. And near term, we're already starting to see that happen.
And they're used to aligning themselves as well with premium brands. So that's probably an easier transition or connection for consumers to make, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a whole nother thing of like how consumers connect with these brands. And like when you define a premium brand, like how do you articulate that and like illustrate that to the consumer when marketing can be so challenging? I think that's an advantage that CPG has over cannabis, is the ability to market.
Exactly.
When you turn on the TV and see commercials, it's a lot of consumer packaged goods products, right? And it's a lot different than the cannabis industry.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So still some challenges to work out there, it sounds like. And then switching gears for our last kind of big topic today, I wanted to talk about sustainability and ESG, and what the future of cannabis might look like in those areas. So I know those two topics are big, important words for not only the cannabis industry, but for other industries. So how can data help inform decisions around sustainability and around ESG, particularly in cannabis?
Yeah, that's a good one, and it is important. I think a couple ways probably. Packaging is one of them. There's certain areas like in Canada, packaging is a bit egregious for the amount of cannabis that you can purchase, or single serving packages are quite plastic intensive, right? And kind of using data to understand, well, what is the volume of sales, and how much plastic is that, and maybe change some rules around things like that. I think is important. I think, for people that are producing products like vape carts that are disposable, right? Like understanding the volume there and really looking at ways to try and have efficient recycling programs. But really understanding the volume of that, I think is key, and data can help you with that.
And hopefully that can inform future legislation as new markets come online, et cetera, I would hope would be the goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think another way is like just inventory controls, like really understanding, projections of your sales over however long and production runs, and making sure you're producing just the right amount. So you're not sitting on a lot of stuff that gets stale or has to be discarded, which is just more waste, more packaging and everything. So really dialing that in, and the added value there, I mean, is like you just have an optimal inventory amount, right? So you're doing like good, and at the same time, you're more efficient. Your business is better.
Yeah, exactly. And then what about from the investor or consumer perspective? I imagine that would help differentiate brands, companies, et cetera, in the marketplace for the consumer as well.
That's true. It's a great opportunity to kind of set yourself apart on that store shelf and talk about how you are building these programs and articulate, what those programs are, and potentially how you're leveraging data to really prove those programs are working.
Okay. So we are just at time, everyone. So thank you, Sky, for the opportunity to interview you. I hope everyone learned a little bit more about how data can help solve challenges in the cannabis industry. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good rest of your conference.